on YouTube. All right, let me get this adjusted here. I apologize for technical difficulties, but we're live now with the Beveling for Beginners YouTube class. We're going to get this shared over to our link and get things going here. First, as we're starting, I'm going to start by wetting this leather down. And try to get started that casing process as we go here. I'm looking for my notifications on here, and if you're on here live with me, go ahead and there we go. Now I think hello. All right, I apologize for technical difficulties there. I know some of you have been waiting just a minute for us to go live here, but we are gonna keep on rolling. If I am sounding okay, I think our audio is working as well. So any problems, let me know what's going on and we will get that troubleshooted. But troubleshot, I don't know, which way does that go? Troubleshot, I think. Anyhow, we're gonna get the stuff figured out is what we're gonna do. But when we talk about beveling, one of the big things here is getting that moisture content right. So I wanted to wait till I was on here so you could see how much water I was putting on there. There is a video that we just released, I believe last week, that has a lot more detail about our moisture content in there and my process for wetting our leather down. But if you haven't seen that yet, be sure to go check that out. Couple things about what we're going to be tooling on this evening. One, this leather is an 8-9 ounce Herman oak leather. The back of this I already have taped. Okay, I've taped that with a clear packing tape, and the reason for that tape is to prevent stretching when we're tooling that. Because anytime we hit a bevel down, we're going to be pushing down on that leather. It has to go somewhere. And what I want that to do is to pick up somewhere else, push out, but not have everything switched already here. Yeah, there you go. You guys are catching on with us now. I know we had another link to this video that we're trying to do, but I will get that figured out for our next free class that we do. I appreciate you guys bearing with me on getting that technical stuff figured out. But as we're working through here, we're going to be talking about different bevels. We're going to go from beginner bevels to some intermediate bevels, some advanced bevels. This is not a class that I want you to leave here thinking, oh, I got to go spend a ton of money on tools. You don't. You can tool with whatever tools you have. You learn to get by with what you have, right? I'm going to go ahead and put one more coat of water down here. We're going to let this sit in here really good. Now, as you guys have questions, be thinking of those good questions to have. It wouldn't be a good live class if we didn't give something away, right? So I have a really awesome giveaway for you that we're going to give away a little bit later on in the live class here. But keep in mind those questions. I have Miss Terry on the other end here watching for some of these questions too. I'm going to keep up the best I can with those, and some of them we may circle back around at the end to pick up as well. But before we jump to this pattern, I just want to show you a couple things here. I want to show you the difference on a couple of these bevels. So we're going to show you 4 different bevels right here to get started with. Because if you are tooling along with me, but if you're tooling along, let me know. I want to know who has this pattern in front of them tooling. Love to see your guys' progress at the end as well. But this pattern is from our volume 1 of the tooling pattern book. So if you do have that book, you can flip that open. It is this corner piece pattern in there. So, and if you are on here live, there is a special for you. If you don't, I know a lot of you guys that signed up already have this book, but if you don't have it and you want to get that, there is a discount code that is good for today only that saves you 20%. So if you just put in discount code CLASS20, CLASS 20, all uppercase. When you check out on the website, that will save you 20% on the digital copy of that book. But if you already have that, I see a couple of you rolling in here that are tooling along with me. That is great. And we're gonna get working all the way through that pattern. But the bevels here, if you are just starting out, one of the beginner kits, this is one that Weaver sells here. This is just a beginner level bevel. Beginner level bevel. It kind of almost rhymes. That wasn't even on purpose. That's pretty cool. You can see that it's pretty coarse in the checkering on there, and it casts out a pretty good shadow. Now, as we move along, this is another bevel. This one is from Weaver. This is going to be the, let's see, small, medium, those large. So this is the large bevel from Weaver, which I didn't put that discount code in the description here, but you can save 20% on anything from Weaver too, as being a follower of my videos here, using discount code Joe10 on that. But you can see that's a lot finer checkering. It's a little bit more of a crisp look to that. So I have really liked this bevel that they have recently come out with. Now we start getting into the ones I really, really like. These are the Berry King bevels here. This one here is just as regular checkered bevel. So you can see the shadow that puts out there. Still a little bit crisper than, it's definitely a lot crisper than the beginner bevel. It's a little bit crisper yet than this Weaver bevel here, but it's not quite as crisp as the XX Steep checkered bevel. So you can see how leather's still a little bit wet. It's pushing that bevel there, but that XX Steep can be really good for getting into some fine detail work. So you can see that it's not much of a shadow that casts out. Regardless of which bevel you're using, like I said, I'm going to be bouncing around a little bit on those. We'll get a little bit later onto some round bevels as well. But it doesn't matter what you use, you're going to get different results. So I don't want people getting frustrated if I'm tooling somewhere with one of these Berry King bevels and you're having a tough time getting the same results, but you're using this beginner bevel here. You're going to get a lot more shadowing, and that's fine, but you just got to realize that's the tool that you're using there. Now, I can get a little less shadowing with the beginner bevel by tipping this back. So if I tip that back there, you can see how I can take that same bevel, that beginner bevel there, but crisp that up a lot more. So you can get more out of your tools when you learn how to do some of those little tricks like that. But when we talk about anything, it doesn't matter which bevel we're using. I'm going to start with just a straight line here, and we'll look at this beginner bevel. I'm going to move this piece out of the way. I've learned I have to watch. If you're tooling in a pearl snap, which I love wearing these pearl snap shirts, but you don't want to have that wrist down there, you'll start marring up your leather. That's a side note for you. That's a bonus. That's not even beveling tip, so that's a freebie in the class here. Okay, our typical thing we're going to say is be holding that bevel straight up and down. Now, there's exceptions to every rule, right? Like I just showed you here, you can tip that back to get a little bit less of a shadow out there. But with that bevel straight up and down, I hit it down. I'm not pushing down with this hand. I want to keep that almost picked up just out of the leather, almost hovering right above the leather. So when I hit it down, my fingers are picking it back up just a little bit. And then that shifts over to the side. Hopefully we get those shadows out of the way. There we go. Rings also get in the way. I just happened to see that comment. Yes, they do. Okay. That one shifts over. I don't want to shift a full bevel length. When I do that, you have a tendency to get this choppy look in there. Looks like a beaver went at your project, so we don't want that. We want to move over just a little bit at a time. So I hit that bevel down, and I barely move that over, and I hit again. So just a little bit each time. So when I slow down, I can smooth that up. And the less that I have to go back and try to clean up my bevels and clean up those lines, every time I have to come back and redo that, it takes up more time, right? So if I just slow down, move just a little bit at a time, I can actually speed my beveling up a lot by getting it done right the first time. Now, I always say this is artwork, it's not science. There's not one right way to do it, right? But there is results that you're after and results you're not after. So we want to try to smooth those lines up the best we can. Picture is fuzzy. Okay. I'm going to, sometimes that autofocus can get me. Thank you for bringing that up. We're going to do a minor adjustment on our angle here and see what that looks like here. There we go. And when we shift to the next one, we'll see how we do too. Okay. So now we talked about how far we're moving that. As far as how tight I'm holding on to that tool, I'm squeezing a little bit on here, but mainly just to control that movement side to side and not letting it bounce. If I get too loose on that, I'm way over exaggerating, but you can see how it's easy to cross over that line. So I'm holding it firm enough to just track this line as we move along here, but I'm not pushing down, and that's the big thing. I see people, when they get started, they're wanting to push down, and then they're hitting, and then they'll loosen up and it'll jump. Like, be firm with your tool here, but relax on pushing it down. You're holding it just above your line there, so it can glide along that. Now, also the pressure that you're hitting that down with, how hard you're striking that tool each time is going to make a difference. So if we can move a little bit at a time, but then be consistent with how hard you're hitting that tool, that's going to help with your consistency. All right, I'm going to set this piece aside. We're going to go back to our project piece here. And as we start rolling through this, I'm going to talk through a few other tips as we go along here. I'm going to switch over. I'm going to grab just a regular checkered bevel here. And yes, Nick, like a jackhammer effect. Essentially, yes, this tool is sitting here, and that pressure going down is pushing it down each time, but your fingers are pulling that bevel right back up. So you can see as I'm moving along here, I'm moving along pretty slow as far as how fast that tool's moving from right to left. But I'm moving at a consistent pace, and I'm hitting down with consistent pressure, and that's allowing to be a
Hey Joe.
Nice pressure. Yes.
Janet, I think it's Trelise is her name, is wondering if you could show her how to hold a beveler closer.
Yes. So let's get a better look at how I'm holding that. It's a great question there. When we're talking about giveaways, that name definitely needs to go down on our giveaway list for drawing for that. But the way I hold this bevel, let's start with just your middle finger and your thumb. Next, I'll bring in my pointer finger above there, but my ring finger down here towards the bottom is going to help guide that a little bit. So I can get my roll of that tool, so I can roll around a corner. For example, right here, when I turn this and I come around that corner there, around that curve, all that turning is coming from right here when I roll these fingers there. But you'll notice too that I have my hand down here. I'm anchoring with this pinky or with my hand at some point to where there's control. I'm not just hovering everything up above here and my elbow's up off the table. I'm planting this arm. It's just out of your screen, but you get the idea. That arm is planted on my table, and my pinky has pressure on the leather here as well. So I'm holding that pinky, I'm pulling this around here as I come around. When I get here, I walk that pinky back a little bit and stretch my hand back out to where I can be kind of crowding that in a little bit and moving along like that. The other thing that we haven't talked about yet, I think I may have seen a question come through about it though, but is which side of the bevel I'm putting against the line. And as you'll notice when I'm looking around here, you're always seeing this flat side of the bevel. So as we look at that bevel, way out of focus and blurry because it's just how it is, but this flat line right on the back, I don't know if you want to call that the heel, the toe. People say one or the other, but I never know which one's which. But right there where the point of that bevel is, that's going to be flat against that line. And I always want that towards me as well. So you'll notice as I'm rotating around here, when I go to bevel a line, if I'm beveling this line and I'm wanting that shadow to move out away from here, and we're going to talk about which side of the line to bevel on a little bit here as we go too, but if that's the way I'm wanting to bevel that line, I have my leather turned this direction. What I don't want to do is have that turned around the other way, turning my bevel so this flat is away from me there and I'm beveling that, because I can't see where I'm going, right? It's all I can do is hope that that's against the line, but it's going to be real easy to walk up over and jump off of that, right? That's why the rear view mirror in your car is so much smaller than the windshield. It's more important to see where you're going than where you've been. So we keep that line to where you can see right where you're going.
I have another Beveler question.
Yes.
And this is from Bev Talmadge, and she's wondering, Joe, do some patterns lean more towards using a checkered beveler versus a smooth beveler? What would be your deciding decision? Thanks.
Great question. I'd say you're welcome, but you better make sure the answer is good before you say thanks. As far as a checkered bevel versus a smooth bevel, it's, in my opinion, it's personal preference. I would show you a smooth bevel, but I don't have one here in my tool block because I don't use them at all. I prefer a checkered bevel. I like it. The texture it gives gives a really nice burnish here. When I say burnish, we're talking about the darker color there, that almost that bruising that you're getting in the leather. And that's coming from a couple things: good quality leather, pressure that I'm striking that tool with, and the moisture content that we have the leather in. So again, on that burnishing thing, I'd refer you back to the video on casing your leather. But that's not to say that smooth bevels are bad by any mean. There's some people that love them, some people that's all they tool with. So there's no right or wrong in that, in my opinion. It's just a personal preference thing and kind of a style thing. So for me, everything that you see me tool and bevel, you're seeing me bevel with a checkered bevel. And even different bevels are going to have a little different checkering of sorts. Some are going to be worn down a little bit more than others. You know, I have bevels that I've used for a long time that checkering's kind of worn down just a little bit, so it's not near as, not near as coarse there. But great question. So no right or wrong in that, in my opinion. I think it's a personal preference. There may be some styles that really call for a smooth bevel or something, but nothing that I do anyhow, or none of the patterns I produce require that smooth bevel. But another thing that can be really tricky getting started is, what side of the line should I bevel on? That's a big question when you come into it. Now, there's a few ways to figure that out, but we're going to walk through a couple different scenarios on that. One being starting with the outside line, right? So when I bevel on this outside of my pattern, I'm wanting that pattern to stand up and the rest of this project to be down below that, right? And we're talking about kind of foreground, background. I want this to stand up. So if that's standing up, I need to bevel out away from there, meaning that shadow is on the outside. Now with that, I just pick a spot here on the outside, which I've done actually all the way down this pattern here. But when I start beveling on a line, this line's cut in, I'm gonna remain on the same side of that line all the way through. So even like this line here, where it comes into my pattern, it comes into my vine work, I still stay on that same line all the way through there till that fades out. Now, any of these lines that are stopping within the vine work, those are the ones that were fading out along there. So meaning they're started really heavy and then they feather off to nothing. And that's the way that we do that is just gonna be by lightening off the pressure. So when you hear, listen for this. See how I let off how much pressure and I'm just barely tapping as that comes along there.
So I have another question about products, and there's a couple of people asking this. Sam Bishop was wondering, where do you purchase the rubber finger guards and rest around your bevel, or did you make them?
I don't have any rubber guards. Oh, you're probably referring back to this one here. This is actually a piece of electrical tape, and all that simply is to mark these tools in my block. I have a set of beginner tools here that I've done some YouTube videos for Weaver leather on. So when I got that kit, I marked every one of those tools. There's, I believe, 6 tools that come in that pack. I marked them with this black tape so I could easily tell and know which ones they were off of here, and they stay in the same spot. Other people have used some rubber. I've seen people use rubber on their tools here, and I believe they just use like some shrink tube. Go to the hardware store and some of that shrink tube stuff. And the only purpose on that is make that tool a little bit wider, maybe a little bit easier to hold on to, especially if there's some arthritis or things like that. But yeah, personally, I don't have any in here that have that on there. That was just some electrical tape that you were seeing on that one, but really good question.
Dan Eklund is also wondering, what size maul do you recommend for work like this?
Okay. Super good question as well. Man, you guys are awesome.
Great question.
That's good questions, make it easy to teach. But so this maul is a 20-ounce maul. I recommend you using one that you are comfortable with. So that's not to say that that has to be a 20-ounce maul. The heavier the maul is, the less down pressure you're going to have to put. But the heavier the maul is, the more you have to work to pick it back up. Now, not that any of them are all that heavy, but I have a big old heavy one over here, and I don't even know what that big one weighs, but I'll use that for like some heavy stamping if I'm gonna do a lot of basket stamp or something, and because it just really, you could set down a really nice crisp stamp with that, but it'll wear your shoulder out a little bit picking that thing back up. So it kind of goes both ways. And then the flip side of that too is a lighter mallet. You have to hit harder with to get the same impression, but it's whatever you're comfortable with. So I hope that, I mean, that's really just a long way to not answer your question, but hopefully it gives you some answer to your question anyhow.
Tons of good questions being asked here.
Yeah.
I threw a couple at you.
Okay.
In a row, but the consummate nerd, I think I'm saying that right. Joe, what would cause the grain opposite the bevel to sit up like a flap, and how do you smooth that down after beveling?
Okay. All right, so the grain being, now if I'm understanding this question correctly, what we're talking about is we're putting this bevel down here and say this vine is curling up or standing up that way. The main cause of that is going to be your moisture content in your leather. It can be a little bit of you tipping your bevel as well, but a lot of that is going to be your moisture content. If your leather's too wet, it's going to want to push that off. Consummate, I think that is consummate nerd. He just put in there exactly. So,
Okay.
in doing that, I'm actually going to take this piece here because it's such a great question, and I think it's one that is really common. You know, it's a common problem that a lot of people have, and it's honestly tooling too wet. So you can see how long this is taking for that water to absorb in there because I'm put a lot on that. So I'm gonna let it absorb just a little bit more, and then I'm gonna come back to that. So don't let me forget, and we're gonna come right back to that, okay? But I want that to absorb in just a little bit more when we do that. The one other thing, or the next thing I want to talk about when we're talking about which side of the line to bevel onto, so I don't get too off track and forget this, but look at your space filler. Sometimes, especially when you're starting, you look at a pattern and it's like, oh my gosh, it just looks like lines, a ton of lines, and you get so focused in on one line and you're not sure. It's like, well, I'm just going to pick and bevel this somewhere. Slow down. Take a step back and look at what is the big picture. What is it that I'm trying to tool here? So if you're tooling like out any of the books here that I do, for example, and you have the opportunity, flip to the page that has the finished tooling pattern on there, so you have something for reference, and then it's easy to see instead of just looking at. Let me switch over here. Instead of just looking at this line art and seeing a bunch of lines, when I turn that, I thought, oh, okay, now I can see we definitely have a flower here, some leaves here, and those vines are rolling around. So and it's easier to see, okay, this is that flower stem that's rolling right here. And so take a step back and look at what that total picture is and find a space filler. For example, these flowers. And I just did this on this side. The same principle that we talked about, finding an outside line and then following those all the way through, you can do on the individual space fillers. So I found an outside line on this flower, and I followed that all the way till it stops here where there's a place to put a flower center at. Turn that around here, I'm going to do the same thing. This outside line, I follow that around till it intersects and runs into the next petal. This one lays over top here, right? Because it doesn't intersect anything. I come to this side, I follow this around. Okay, so you can work your way around the individual pieces until the picture starts becoming more clear as well. All right, before I get too far off here, we're gonna jump back to this piece that's too wet down here. Now, we talked about how wet that's being. The thought is that leather wrinkling up on you. So just like this, and if there's any problems in the comments, just block them off. I won't put up with everything in the comments. Let's keep it positive, and that's just kind of the rules of the channel. So if we're moderating and you get stopped, sorry. But you can see where this blocks over here. that's your cut line right there, but it shoved that all the way in, right? And I kind of over exaggerated to really get, I believe it was the consummate nerd, is that who was asking about this? But I think this is kind of that wrinkling that you're talking about. Well, how, and that's again, pretty exaggerated, but with that being too wet, that's what's causing that to shove off of there. And Michelle, how to bevel a circle? That's a great question as well, and we're gonna get to that because I want to talk about a bevel selection in that as well. But hopefully this answers your question. If you're getting that look there, it's that leather's too wet. Let that dry out a little bit more, because if your leather's too dry, so I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna put a cut over here on that dry leather, and we'll bevel this. I can hit that down really hard, and it doesn't shove over at all. I mean, I have to hit down pretty darn hard just to get burnishing in there. If I bevel how I normally would, I'm not even getting much burnishing in that. So let your leather dry out a little bit more, and that's gonna probably take care of 95% of that wrinkling problem for you on that.
So Joe, while we're talking about leather,
Yeah.
and just real quick, there are tons of really good questions being asked, and there is no way possible this would be a 3-hour video if I went through. But I want everybody to know I'm keeping track of the questions. Your name will go into the drawing, and Joe will come back and answer your questions personally if it doesn't get on live.
Yes.
So, but in the meantime, I cannot pronounce this name. Hevituff Hutch.
Okay.
What leather do you recommend for economical practice? I've been trying on veg bellies, but it seems like there are so many rough spots in the bellies.
Yep, bellies are tough. That leather is pretty spongy, so it's not going to tool as well. But as far as the economics of it go, the best leather that I've found that's not Herman oak, it's a touch less expensive than that as far as the economics go, is the Weaver Select. But short of that, most of that import leather and stuff, it's not going to tool up the same, which if I'm not saying you can't tool on the inexpensive import leathers, but just with anything, whatever your materials you're building out of, whatever materials you're working with, your results are going to reflect that. So if you're learning on a lower quality material, it's going to be a lot more difficult to get the results that you're after, and can really create a lot of frustrations for you and lengthen that learning curve. So I always encourage people to even buy smaller portions of that. And, you know, you can find some places with a lower grade even, but that Herman oak, the way they tan it, it's going to do a lot better. Weaver sells the Herman oak in the smaller panels. You can do that. If you're looking for like individual belt blanks and stuff, we offer belt blanks on the website that are Herman oak, so you don't have to invest in that full side. But yeah, it does make a difference in the tooling. But yeah, tooling on the bellies is, you'll find that even more frustrating with the sponginess that it gives you. So I had a question about circles. Now, this is a great question, because if you have a bevel that's too big and you're trying to bevel around a circle, you can create this kind of a choppy line in there. I mean, I can exaggerate that with a little bit longer bevel even, so you can really see in a bigger way what I'm talking about, right? It's that big choppy line there, okay? Now, what if all you had was this big old huge bevel? I think this is like a number 4 or something from Barry King. It's the biggest one he offers. I can take that same bevel and get around that circle if I have to, and it's the only one. We've talked about keeping that bevel straight up and down. You know, now we talked a little bit about our tipping back to you to shorten that shadow up a little bit if need be, but I can also tip that to the side. Now you got to be careful going down a straight line doing that, because you can, makes it easier to create a little bit of a choppiness to that. But if I take this big long bevel, which is clearly too big to fit around a tight circle here, and I tip that up, I've essentially shortened that bevel up. So I can either size down in my bevel size, get a smaller length, go down even smaller. Shoot, you can even go to super small like that, right? And you can get around something super tiny. However, sometimes we don't have a bunch of bevels when we start. I know I didn't. I couldn't afford very many tools when I started, so I just had to get by with what I had. And by taking this bevel and tipping it towards the side, now I'm shortening how much of that tool is actually in the leather. And I can take this big old long bevel and roll right around that circle with hardly any chatter. Practice on the imported double shoulder that Weaver carries in their clearance section. Low grade, but a lot of leather for less than $50. So yeah, I'm not sure whoever was asking the question about the leather there. It looks like Brian found another great for some of the import leather for a real economical price there, to give you lots of leather to practice on. So thank you, Brian, for helping out with that leather selection there. But that for circles can really help, is getting either one, getting the right size of bevel, or two, making what you have work by tipping that a little bit. Now, when we talk about inside of circles, that can be another story, right? I'm gonna throw a couple more cuts in there. Inside of circles can be really hard, because even with that big bevel and I'm trying to tip that around there, I can still kind of get by with that, but that's a big old bevel for that little tiny circle. But you can see how that's wanting to kind of push and cause a little bit of that wrinkle. One, because this is that piece that we wet down super wet too, but two, because it's tipping so much in there. But if you can size down just a little bit, so this is like a number 2 from Barry, which is comparable. It's kind of right in between the medium and the large of the Weaver bevels. But this one here takes a little bit less tipping, but that little bit of tip I can get around that inside. Now, if you're looking for something that you do want to just add to your tool block and want to invest in another tool or two, then I would recommend a round bevel, because these things are super amazing too. But so this is a round checkered bevel here. Whoa, I don't know if that's blurry to you. It looked blurry to me for a second, but you can see the face of this is rounded here instead of straight across. So that works outstanding inside these curves. Fits right around in there. And you can get that in different size. Chef Kiss, those Barry King tools. I love that comment. Yes, you were correct. These are awesome. I love them. Okay. Now, one other bevel that we have not talked about here much, we did a little bit when we talked here, is these XX steep bevels. You guys hear me talk about them in other videos. So I'm going to pull one of these out as I start running through some of this vine work in this pattern.
Great thing answer. There's been lots of questions about them.
Lots of questions, yeah. Do you have to have one of these to tool? Absolutely not. Are they amazing? Yes, I think so. So the main thing about these is they're steep. The steepness of them, it's right in the name, the XX steep. So when you compare the regular one, which I had been beveling the rest of this with, versus this XX steep, you can see the difference in the angle of that. So how steep that angle is where your checkering is, right? Where that shadowing is coming from. And so it's going to cast out a smaller shadow away from there. And that works really well in tighter vine work. you start layering in these vines. I mean, right in here, look how close I just came to the edge of this leaf, and I didn't smash anything down I don't want to, because that is such a crisp tool and it fits right in there. And it makes it really easy to track those lines. And then watch the fade that we get out of this. You can see this line. I faded it with my knife because this is a line that's ending within that vine work. It's not running into anything. It's just ending and fading off. So I'm going to fade this off with this steep bevel. And it just fades out to nothing. It works super well in those places. And I find that it seems to be easier for a lot of beginners to track within that line. And you can achieve that look with this steep bevel and still hold that up and down, not have to use as much control with it, as opposed to using that regular flatter bevel and wanting to get that steep look. You have to start learning your control of tipping that back and how far to tip back, but doing so without really hitting that too hard and smashing your leather away. So it can get a little trickier as you're trying to control and learn how to tip those bevels. And that's where I find that those extra steep bevels make it extremely easy. So again, this bevel that just got done casting out these big shadows out here when I had it straight up and down, just put in this really nice crisp little bevel line here because I tipped that back and controlled the tool that I was using. And that's gonna, again, that tool control, it's just gonna come with practice, right? You know, it's nothing, there's nothing we can do here in 1 hour that's gonna make anybody an expert tooler by any means, right? This is all meant to be tools to help you move along in your journey, help to kind of shorten that learning curve and minimize minimize some of the hardships that you may have to go through in learning, save some frustrations. But it is a great tool. I love it. I really have enjoyed my extra steep bevels. As far as size on them, this one here is a number 2, and I find it to be the most useful for me as far as being a universal size. We talked about tipping that bevel and getting by in smaller areas. And you may have seen me do that throughout this pattern a little bit without talking about it much even, or before I talked about it. But like right here, to get around these little tighter curves here, you can see me tip that bevel a little bit to get around there. And I'll come right around here, tip that. And so I find myself doing that so much more than setting that down and getting this little tiny bevel to fit in somewhere. And not that that's the right way to do it. I mean, gosh, I have this really nice little tiny bevel. I should switch tools and use this one, right? Except for I learned with not very many tools in my tool block. So I learned to get by with very little tools, and I guess, what do they say? Old habits die hard, but I don't know. Some people say old habits die hard, but I think efficiencies last a long time. And so rather than I see it as being an old habit, I see it as an efficiency in my tooling too. If I have this bevel in my hand and I can achieve a look using this bevel, and it saves me time from having to switch tools in my tool block, then I'm going to do that. Now there's some places and some patterns that you have to size down on your tools, but those type of patterns aren't typically going to be a beginner type of pattern anyhow. And I I couldn't catch the name on it, but a question just came up, and I just caught the question there, and it was an excellent question. So Miss Terry, I'm sure caught the name on that, but the question was, do I have a different tool selection for different weights of leather?
Yeah.
And that is such an excellent question, and it feeds right into this particular tool, this extra steep tool. You can tool on different weights with the same tools, but it's a little bit trickier. So for me personally, I mean, can I tool on 2-3 ounce with this extra steep bevel? I can, but I sure don't want to, and I don't like to. If I have to tool on something that light, then I would prefer to grab my flatter bevel, my regular bevel that casts a little bit more of a shadow out there, for 2 reasons. And one reason is to cut down on my chance of going through the leather, right? This is, I mean, that's a pretty sharp tool, really. I mean, not sharp like you're going to cut yourself, but it's a steep tool, so with not much pressure down, you can really get some depth in there. Now, the other thing is if I'm on really if I'm on really thin leather that I'm tooling, I want to get the appearance of the depth, but you only have so much leather that you're working with, right, for that thickness. So I can't really just get at that as far as like you would on a heavy skirting leather, like what you're going to build a saddle out of or something. You can hammer away on some tools and just get the actual depth. But on a thin leather, you have to get the appearance of the depth. And so a flatter bevel that casts out more of that shadow is going to give the appearance of more depth without actually having to tool that deep with your leather there. But that is a great question that you bring up on that.
Well, that was Amanda Thompson that asked that question. And then Nick asked, and it's a beginner, intermediate, advanced, and so on, what bevelers and how many bevelers would you recommend for each level of crafter?
Boy, that's a good question there too. And first, let me tell you what bevels I use primarily. I guess that may be the easiest way to answer this question. I primarily use, if I could only have one bevel in my whole block, I would have my number 2 regular checkered bevel from Beveling. It's universal. I can get into tighter spots. It's long enough I can still run down a big long line and it not take forever. And I showed you how we can tip that back and make it a little steeper if needed. The next one that I would get would be probably my little round bevel. And that's that round checkered bevel we looked at. That's going to work. I'm going to switch to that here real quick. It's going to work really well on these little tight curves. Because I can also use this, as I do. This is exactly what I use. The tool that I use in place of a lifter, which this is a beveling class, so I'm not going to get too far into that. But if you're familiar with what a lifter is, then you can see where this tool can be used in place of that as well. So this would be the next one that I would really want to add, or a smaller bevel, just sizing way down in that checkered bevel. But again, these are the nicer Berry King ones. If you wanted to upgrade from your beginner kit bevel and want to upgrade that a little bit, but not go as far as spending quite the investment of the Berry King bevels, then I would recommend the Weaver medium bevel. They come in small, medium, large, and extra large. But the medium one would be the one I would recommend, medium or large, depending on what you're building. If you're doing a lot of patterns, you know, bigger like this, maybe that large one would be good. But this medium would allow you to get into some tighter places if need be. And then beyond that, it's really just a matter of how much you want to invest in your tool block. You know, how much you want to spend on it, what your budget is on that. And the nicer of the tools that you can get, or, you know, the easier that beveling's going to be for you. But I don't use very many bevels when I work. I got by with, like I said, that one Barry King bevel for a long time before I started being able to add to it. So you don't have to buy a bunch of bevels. You sure can. There's a bunch of them out there that you can get, but you don't have to. And even as a beginner, you know, when you're learning to do something, the better tools you have, I mean, the easier it is to learn the skills, right? It's like if you're gonna learn to bake, if you're gonna learn to bake brownies, it's easier to do that on a nice stove in the kitchen or with a nice oven in the kitchen than it is off a little easy bake oven with a light bulb, right? You're gonna get a little more consistent results. So, not that I'm much of a baker and know much about either one, but I guess I could just imagine, and it seemed like a good analogy. So hopefully that makes sense to somebody. Anyhow, yeah, good question. Hopefully that answers it for you.
As you're talking about different kind of tools that you can purchase, Argon 303 was wanting to know about swivel knife blades. What kind of blade do you recommend? I see different blade length and so many different swivel knives.
Yes, oh my goodness. About as many people as are making tools have swivel knife options, right? This again, I mean, huge personal preference thing. I personally, what I use a 3/8 wide barrel and a 1/4 inch straight blade. That's what's comfortable for me. Right, wrong, or indifferent. I mean, there's no, again, like with most of this stuff, there's no definite right or wrong with it. But that's what I like to use. That's what feels good in my hand. The knife that you've seen me using here, this is the SKB from Leather Wranglers. I really like this. It's a super nice, I mean, look at the action in that swivel there. I mean, it just teeters to a stop. And a great blade that stays really sharp. But, and so that's what I've been using now. This is a Barry King knife. Still a good swivel on that, but you can see not quite the action as the Leather Wranglers. But I used the same configuration, the 3/8 barrel, the 1/4 inch blade, and I used that for a long time. So that's going to be a personal preference thing on that too. But like I said, I used that Barry King one for a long time on that. So as I'm getting down here, we're getting like kind of these last couple lines. And I know we're running past the 5:30 mark a little bit, but we started a little bit later with the technical difficulties. So that is going to play a part in that, but we're kind of finishing up here. A few things as we finish. One, Ms. Terry said there has been lots of questions that I have not even got a chance to answer yet on this, but I will try to go back and answer the best I can on a lot of those, and feel free to continue those comments coming in so we can try to help you the best we can. But there is a little bit of stuff in the description I would like to tell you about. If you guys like this this detailed instruction and really being able to see right up close to what we're doing, I would offer a couple other couple other options for you in the description there. One, if you're just getting started with tooling, my Fundamentals for Floral Carving class is an online class that you purchase once and you go back and watch as much as you want. And that one there, I walk through all my tools kind of from start to finish, clear to, hey, this is what I like for a work surface. And we go all the way through the fundamentals of each of those tools and to tooling a full pattern. So that is a great class. I highly recommend it for anybody wanting to kind of shorten that learning curve in their tooling. The other class that's linked in there that I want to tell you about is the Leather Life classroom, and that's a subscription-based class. I know many of you are already in there. We're getting a lot of people in that class, which is amazing. But that one is a monthly subscription. You get a new pattern, a project pattern, along with videos each month. That goes live at the first of the month, and you have access to, with a current subscription, you have access to the past patterns as well as their videos. But those videos walk through start to finish from any tooling, construction, dye work, finish work, all of that. So it gives you some projects that you can either give away as gifts if you're doing it for a hobby, or be able to sell, if this is something you're trying to make your own business out of. So I would like to invite you over that. If you follow that link in the description here, you can get signed up with a 2-week free trial. And once you're in there, if you decide it's not for you, you quit anytime. But we do that class at $15 a month. And my goal has always been to make it such an incredible value that there's no way once you're in there and see the value that you're going to want to leave. So I would invite you to join us in on that as well. Excuse me. Don't forget to, if you weren't here right at the beginning, this pattern comes from the volume 1 of my tooling pattern book. And that book, I know many of you already have that, but if you don't and you would like to get a hold of the digital copy of that, today only, it expires at midnight, but there's a coupon code you can use. You use code CLASS20, all capital letters, CLASS20, the number 20, and that'll save you 20% on that digital copy. So if you wanted to tool along with this pattern and make something, I'm actually going to be making an iPad cover with this piece here that I'm tooling up, and that I'm gonna make a video showing that construction on that as well. And that one's going to be, I think I'm going to do just a free YouTube video on that. So if you're not already, be sure to subscribe to the channel and you don't miss out on getting notified when we come out with new videos on that as well. So the other thing we talked about was giving a free giveaway. Yeah. So Miss Terry's been tracking who's been asking questions there. We have names going in, been written down on paper, and we got them going in a bag here. And so we are going to draw a name out right now. And what we're giving away, I don't even think I said what we're giving. I didn't even tell you what we're giving away here.
So they would have asked a lot of questions.
Oh man, yes. Okay, so I'm gonna see if I can flip this around here. All right, flip it around. Don't mind the transition there. Tighten that up a little bit. Okay, here we are.
Oh,
Turn
this is fun.
Turn the lights back around. But what we're giving away here is we have a new item in our merchandise line, the 23 plus long sleeve shirt. This has, I have to say, become my favorite shirt in my entire closet, not just because of the 23 plus, which I do think is a cool logo. If you don't know the story on that, check out the website for a story on that. But these are produced by my wife's company, S&D Design Company. And she uses these Bella canvas, so they're so dang comfy. I mean, not to get weird, but like really comfortable, soft. I love it. So we're gonna give one of these away, and we have
a name.
We have a name. We have a winner.
He has asked a lot of good questions and has lots of really good. He's helped a lot of people with some comments. So
excellent.
The consummate nerd.
The consummate nerd. All right.
He is the winner today.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, congratulations on that win. Now, how to claim your free shirt. I need you to send me either an email. You can send me an email. You can send me a message via Facebook. The page on Facebook is at 23plus 23plus. On Instagram at 23plus.leatherwork. So 23plus.leatherwork. And so even if you're not the consummate nerd, but you haven't followed us on there, be sure and check those out. We have lots of different content on there, videos, patterns, that sort of thing as well. Or you can send me an email, just my name, mealingjoe, MELINGJOE @yahoo.com. And send me that email. I need name, shipping address, t-shirt size, and email. So,
Well, and just to add, just because this is what I do, if
yes.
anyone did not win and they are interested in purchasing a short sleeve or long sleeve shirt, there is merchandise for sale on the website.
Yes, so on the website, 23plus.com, all spelled out, 23plus. Go check that out. There's patterns, courses, that sort of thing on there, and merchandise. So we have these black shirts in the long sleeve now. We have them in the short sleeve, and we also have arriving this week hats.
Yes.
Not this hat with the round 23 plus logo, but it's got the tooled bucking horse on there. It's really cool. So those are coming up. Lots of fun things to see. But thank you so much for being a part of this. Any questions that you have, shoot them my way. I intend to have some more of these different webinar classes, so I hope this has been something that you've enjoyed, and we'll work on getting some different things put together as far as doing the live webinars, so we don't run into the technical difficulties that we did here. But thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Take care.